On this resource, we explore history to make your sleep more pleasant and meaningful. Don't forget to show your support, as by the end of our story, you'll easily drift off to sleep. Close your eyes and we'll begin. This lecture lasts 100 minutes. In human history, that's a minor span of time, but those 100 minutes can significantly change your perception of the past. We'll view history not as a collection of numbers and names, but as a dynamic process full of unexpected events, random circumstances, and discoveries that shape the fates of millions. There won't be a dry presentation of known facts. Instead, we'll focus on moments rarely discussed in textbooks, which truly alter our understanding of history. These could be forgotten societies that left impressive achievements. These could be events that happened by chance, but changed the course of world history. They may also include discoveries by scientists and thinkers who were ahead of their time and opened new horizons for humanity. Throughout our lecture, we'll move from ancient times to modernity, step by step selecting not the most obvious, but the most significant examples. Each one adds detail to the overall picture of the past and prompts reflection on the fragility and variability of human history, about hidden connections and unexpected twists. These 100 minutes will become a journey during which we'll uncover new meanings in familiar events, and perhaps after this we'll see history in a new light. When it comes to great ancient civilizations, Egypt with its pyramids or Mesopotamia with Sumerian cities, and the first laws often come to mind. However, if we push aside these familiar examples and look a bit broader, we can discover an astonishing society that existed along the banks of the Indus River in South Asia. This is the Indus civilization, also known as the Harappan culture. It emerged around 2500 BCE and lasted almost 1,000 years. Its territory spanned vast areas, from the Arabian Sea coast to the Himalayas, from eastern Iran to the northwest part of India. One of the distinctive features of this civilization was its cities. Unlike the chaotically developed cities of Mesopotamia or Egypt, the Indus cities looked like someone had carefully planned them. In Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, streets intersected at right angles, neighborhoods had similar sizes, and houses were built according to uniform standards. Imagine an ancient city where urban planning rules were already in place. All bricks had the same size, indicating a centralized production organization. In some locations, archaeologists find brick warehouses, suggesting preparation for new neighborhoods. The homes of the Indus people were also impressive. Many houses were 2 stories high and had internal courtyards, with almost every one having its own well, ensuring access to clean water right at home. Additionally, there was a drainage system. The walls of houses had shafts for channeling water and waste, connecting to city canals lined with burnt bricks, leading outside the city. In some areas, there were access points for cleaning the canals. This resembles modern sewage systems, yet we're talking about a city that's over 4,000 years old. One of the most impressive structures in Mohenjo-daro was the Great Bath, a rectangular pool approximately 12 by 7 meters and about 2.5 meters deep. Its walls and bottom were meticulously lined with brick and coated with bitumen for waterproofing. A staircase led to the bath, and nearby were changing rooms. Water flowed in through a channel and drained away after use. Scholars believe the bath was used for ritual washings, and the technical perfection of this structure amazes even modern engineers. The economy of the Indus civilization was closely tied to agriculture. The inhabitants grew wheat, barley, millet, and cotton, becoming one of the first societies to process cotton for fabric. They also engaged in livestock breeding and fishing. Streets reveal granaries built to protect supplies from moisture and rodents, indicating they knew how to ensure food security. Trade played an important role in the life of this civilization. Archaeologists find beads made of lapis lazuli, turquoise, carnelian, and gold, as well as ceramics and metal products. Seals depicting animals and symbols have even been found in Mesopotamia, indicating that the residents of the Indus Valley maintained connections with other great civilizations. Some scholars believe they traded cotton, grain, and handcrafted items. However, the writing system of the Indus civilization remains a mystery. Short inscriptions of symbols found on seals, amulets, and ceramics likely constituted a writing system, but no one has been able to decipher them so far. We don't know what language these people spoke, so we lack the ability to understand their thoughts and beliefs. This makes the Indus civilization one of the most mysterious in ancient history. We also know very little about the political structure of this society. Egypt had pharaohs, Mesopotamia had kings, but no palaces or monumental temples have been found in the Indus civilization. There are no statues of rulers or images of military campaigns. It all appears as if this was a society without a clearly defined elite, where power was distributed differently, perhaps through councils or priestly communities. This raises the question, perhaps the residents of the Indus Valley found their unique path to balance, distinct from the power structures of other civilizations. By the end of the second millennium BCE, the civilization began to decline. Various theories exist regarding the causes: shifting river courses, prolonged droughts, invasions by the Indus people, diseases, or economic difficulties. It's possible several factors intersected. Cities gradually emptied, and the once flourishing culture vanished, leaving only ruins in its wake. Today, the Indus civilization serves as an example of how complex and advanced the society could have been in deep antiquity. When we talk about the beginning of urban culture, we remember Egypt and Sumer. However, here we see a remarkable example of how thousands of years ago, people managed to create a system that would seem incredibly modern even in the Middle Ages. Now let's move to another corner of the ancient world, to the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Here, in the fertile lands of southern Mesopotamia, arose a civilization that gifted humanity something that forever changed the course of history. The Sumerians are one of the oldest and most significant civilizations in human history. Their homeland was in the south of Mesopotamia, in a place that the Greeks later named Mesopotamia, meaning between rivers. In the 4th millennium BCE, the first city-states emerged. The climate in that region was challenging. Summers featured high temperatures, and rainfall was scarce, leading to soil salinization. Nevertheless, the Sumerians managed to harness the power of rivers and create a complex irrigation system. They built channels, dams, and reservoirs, allowing them to harvest crops even during droughts. Thus, the need for water management led to the rise of centralized authority and the first urban communities. Sumerian cities marked a significant breakthrough in human history. Uruk, one of the most famous, is sometimes called the first megacity. Archaeologists estimate its population in the 3rd millennium BCE was around 50,000 people, an impressive number for that time. Uruk was surrounded by walls containing residential areas, markets, workshops, and temples within. Each city had its own patron. In Uruk, it was the goddess Nana, embodying love and war. In Ur, they worshipped the moon god Nana, while in Nippur, it was the supreme god Enlil. Ziggurats, huge step towers, were built for these gods, towering above the cities. The upper platforms housed shrines accessible only to priests. One of the greatest achievements of the Sumerians was the invention of writing. Initially, it served economic purposes. They drew images on clay tablets to record the quantities of grain, livestock, or goods. Over time, the symbols became more complex, and by the 10th century BCE, cuneiform writing emerged. Instead of pictures, scribes began using combinations of wedge-shaped marks pressed into soft clay with a reed stylus. The tablets were then baked for durability. This enabled them to record not just economic information, but also myths, laws, letters, and contracts. Cuneiform became a crucial tool that transformed society. It enabled the management of vast territories, tax recording, and archiving. This led to the establishment of a bureaucracy that ensured the state's functioning. Furthermore, writing laid the foundation for literature. The greatest work of Sumerian literature is the Epic of Gilgamesh. This tale recounts the story of the king of Uruk and his friendship with Enkidu, exploring themes of immortality and the inevitability of death. Written 4,000 years ago, the epic raises philosophical questions still relevant today. It includes motifs later reflected in the Bible, such as the story of a great flood, a boat, and survivors. The Sumerians were the first in human history to create a code of laws. The earliest known is the Code of Ur-Nammu, compiled in the 21st century BCE. It set punishments for theft, murder, and false accusations, and defined fines. These laws were based on the principle of restitution and aimed to organize social life. Later, Hammurabi's code continued this tradition. However, it was the Sumerians who established the idea that power should be codified in written norms. Additionally, they possessed knowledge in mathematics and astronomy. They developed a counting system based on the number 60. Because of this, we still divide an hour into 60 minutes and a circle into 360 degrees. They could measure areas, calculate crop yields, and maintain a calendar. Their calendar was lunar, dividing the year into 12 months, each with 29 or 30 days. To align it with the solar year, they added extra months. These astronomical observations laid the groundwork for future Babylonian calendars and those of the ancient world. Sumerian society had a multi-tiered structure. At the top were rulers, sometimes referred to as the gods' vicegerents on earth. Priests managing temples and controlling economic production also played significant roles. Below them were free farmers, artisans, and merchants. Slaves existed in society too, often war captives or debtors. However, Sumerian society was quite flexible. There are known instances of slaves buying their freedom, and free citizens became wealthy through trade or craftsmanship. While ziggurats rose in Mesopotamia and pyramids were built in Egypt, a great Olmec culture was developing on the other side of the world, across the ocean. This culture evolved independently, without links to Sumer or Egypt, but its achievements significantly influenced the future of the entire continent. The Olmecs are often called the mother of the civilizations of the New World. They inhabited modern-day southeastern Mexico, in the regions of Veracruz and Tabasco. Their culture existed from around the mid-2nd millennium BCE and reached its peak by the 9th-10th centuries BCE. Everything we know about the Maya and Aztecs, including writing, calendars, rituals, and architecture, largely traces back to Olmec culture. The most famous monuments of the Olmec culture are the gigantic stone heads. These monoliths reach 3 meters in height and weigh tons, depicting rulers or leaders. Their faces show individual features: wide noses, full lips, and helmet-like headdresses. Several dozen of these heads are known, and they amaze with their scale. The Olmecs used basalt, quarried from mountains hundreds of kilometers away, to create them. This speaks to the high organization of society and the availability of significant resources. However, the Olmec contribution isn't limited to sculpture. They were the first in Mesoamerica to create centers with monumental architecture. In La Venta, San Lorenzo, and Tres Zapotes, archaeologists discovered pyramid platforms, temples, and ritual plazas. These sites served not only as residences, but also as religious centers. La Venta, for example, featured a large earthen pyramid, over 30 meters tall, possibly symbolizing a sacred mountain. Olmec religion was closely tied to nature. They worshipped deities of rain and fertility, often depicting jaguars, which they considered sacred creatures. Their art features the so-called Olmec baby jaguar, figures with human bodies and jaguar-like facial features. Scholars suggest this reflects myths about unions between people and animal spirits. Similar images would later appear among the Maya and Aztecs, later appeared among the Maya and Toltecs. The Olmecs, like the Sumerians, developed the foundations of writing. Symbols found on the Tres Zapotes monument are considered by many scholars to be the oldest form of writing in the Americas. They also had a calendar system that preceded the famous Maya calendar. All this shows that the Olmecs laid a cultural foundation upon which more well-known civilizations later thrived. Their economy relied on agriculture. They cultivated maize, beans, squash, and cacao. The Olmecs were skilled artisans, creating masks from jade and obsidian, carving figurines from stone, and crafting jewelry and amulets. Trade connected various regions. Artifacts from Olmec centers include materials brought from far distances, such as obsidian from central Mexico. So why did this culture disappear? By the end of the first millennium BCE, the main Olmec centers began to decline. Climate changes, floods, or volcanic eruptions may have contributed to this. However, their traditions didn't vanish. They passed on to other Mesoamerican peoples. That's why historians refer to the Olmecs as the mother of civilizations. They were the first to create a system that later developed among the Maya, Toltecs, and Aztecs. The Olmecs remain a mystery. We know of them through stone heads, masks, and ritual items, but their texts remain undeciphered, leaving much of their culture a secret. Nonetheless, it's evident that without the Olmecs, the history of America would look different. They laid the groundwork for religion, art, writing, and governance that shaped the destinies of New World peoples for millennia. After exploring the ancient Olmecs in America, let's return to Europe and examine an event that became one of the most significant moments in ancient history. This is the Battle of Marathon, which occurred in 490 BCE. It symbolized resistance and proved that even a small independent country could withstand a powerful world empire. To understand the battle's importance, we need to remember that during this time, the Persian Empire under Darius I was the most powerful state on the planet. Its borders stretched from the Indian shores to Egypt, from the Caspian Sea to Asia Minor. The Persian army numbered hundreds of thousands of warriors, controlling dozens of different peoples and cultures. The Greek city-states, small and fragmented, seemed insignificant compared to this powerful machine. The invasion's cause was Athens' support for the revolt of the Greek cities in Asia Minor against Persia. Darius sought not only to punish Athens for its audacity, but also to completely subjugate Greece, turning it into another satrapy, just as he did with other lands. The Persian forces crossed the Aegean Sea and landed in Attica on the plain near Marathon. According to ancient sources, the Persian forces totaled around 20,000, including infantry, archers, and cavalry. Athens could muster about 10,000 hoplites, heavily armed warriors in bronze armor with large round shields. They were assisted by 1,000 warriors from the city of Plataea, an ally of Athens. Thus, the total strength of the Greek army reached 11,000. The Spartans were also called for help, but were celebrating a religious festival, Carneia, during which they couldn't march. The Spartans promised to arrive later, but they didn't make it in time for the battle. Thus, Athens found itself nearly alone against a mighty empire. The Athenian commander was the general Miltiades, an experienced warrior who had previously served as a mercenary in Persia and knew its army well. His resolve played a crucial role. The Athenians hesitated. Many suggested defending behind the city walls, but Miltiades convinced them to engage in battle on the plain. His plan was unconventional. He ordered the phalanx to be formed with a weakened center, but strong flanks. This was risky, but this very tactic led to success. When the battle commenced, the Athenians charged forward to close the distance and avoid the Persian archers' arrows. This was a bold move, as Greek warriors had always moved in step to maintain formation. When they met the Persian infantry, the Greek center began to give way, and the Persians advanced. But at that moment, Miltiades' strategy kicked in. The strengthened Greek flanks broke through the Persian lines and began to surround them. Soon the Persian formation was encircled. Panic ensued. Darius' warriors began retreating toward the sea, toward their ships, but the Greeks pursued them and inflicted serious casualties. Ancient historians report that over 600 Persians lay dead on the battlefield, while the Athenians lost around 200, including Archon Callimachus, one of the 9 highest officials of Athens. The Plataeans lost only 11 warriors. These figures illustrate how devastating the defeat was. The remaining Persians hurriedly sailed away, but still tried to outflank Athens and land elsewhere. However, Miltiades' warriors quickly returned to the city and managed to fortify the walls. Seeing that the Athenians were ready to confront them, the Persians abandoned the attack and retreated. One of the most famous legends of antiquity is associated with this event, the story of the herald Phidippides. It's believed he ran from Marathon to Athens, covering about 42 kilometers, to announce the great victory to the citizens. Upon delivering the news with the words, "Rejoice, we have won," he collapsed and died from exhaustion. This legend became the foundation for the modern sport of marathon running, symbolically preserving the memory of that feat. However, the historical significance of the battle is far more important. If Athens had been defeated, all of Greece might have fallen under Persian control. Greek culture wouldn't have developed as we know it, and it may never have gifted the world with the philosophical ideas of Socrates and Plato, the tragedies of Aeschylus and Sophocles, or the discoveries of Archimedes and Euclid. The victory at Marathon was the first signal that Persia wasn't as invincible as believed, and opened a new chapter in the history of the Greek struggle for freedom. For the Athenians, this event became a source of pride and a symbol that even a small group of free people defending their homeland and laws could triumph over a vast army led by a king who controlled much of the world. In the following decades, the Greeks faced even heavier trials, such as the battles at Thermopylae, Salamis, and Plataea. However, it was the Battle of Marathon that demonstrated that Persia could be stopped. Thus, this single battle on a small plain changed not only the fate of Athens, but all of European history. Yet military actions weren't the only factors shaping history. Sometimes everything depended on who decided to venture where. Here, we approach one of the most famous themes in world history, the discovery of America. When we mention this event, the name Christopher Columbus often comes to mind. In 1492, he set sail under the Spanish flag, hoping to find the shortest route to Asia across the Atlantic Ocean. He believed the Earth was smaller than many scholars thought, and that one could reach the East Indies by going west. His expedition consisted of 3 ships, Santa Maria, Pinta, and Niña. In October of the same year, after 36 days at sea from the Canary Islands, the sailors finally spotted land. It turned out to be San Salvador Island in the Bahamas. Thus, Europe rediscovered a new world. However, it's crucial to note that Columbus didn't realize he had reached a new continent. Until his dying days, he was convinced he had found a way to Asia, which was then called India. Therefore, he referred to the locals as Indians. His 4 voyages revealed to Europe not a route to Asia, but an entirely new world, previously unknown. Yet, it would be incorrect to claim that Columbus was the first European to set foot on American soil. 500 years prior, Scandinavian Vikings had done so. Around 1000 CE, long before the era of great geographical discoveries, they had already reached the North American continent. The main figure in these events was Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red, who founded a colony in Greenland. Vikings were exceptional sailors. Their long ships, called drakars, could navigate both open seas and rivers. In search of new lands, they moved further westward. Around 1001, Leif Erikson reached a territory that Scandinavians named Vinland, translating to Land of Grapes. Based on descriptions in the sagas, it was a fertile land with a mild climate and rich nature. Modern research links Vinland to the North American coast, likely to areas in present-day Canada around Newfoundland. Archaeological finds support these tales. In the mid-20th century, remnants of Norwegian structures, longhouses, forges, and warehouses from that era were discovered in a Canadian site called L'Anse aux Meadows. This proves that the Vikings not only reached America, but also attempted to establish a settlement there. However, it didn't last long, likely only a few years or decades. Possible reasons include climatic difficulties, conflicts with locals, or distance from major Scandinavian colonies in Greenland and Iceland. Thus, 500 years before Columbus, America had already been discovered. Yet the Vikings' discovery didn't impact the world, as it didn't gain widespread recognition and was forgotten for centuries. Their colonies didn't take root, and memories of them only survived in Icelandic sagas, viewed more as legends than historical facts. Only 20th century archaeology confirmed these stories as true. Columbus, on the other hand, made a discovery that marked the beginning of a new era. His voyage led to the colonization of America and the exchange of goods, plants, animals, and diseases between the Old World and the New World, a phenomenon historians call the Columbian Exchange. Potatoes, corn, tomatoes, and tobacco came to Europe from America, while horses, firearms, and diseases reached America, forever altering the lives of native peoples. Thus, the two events, the journey of Leif Erikson and the expedition of Christopher Columbus, are intertwined in history. One became a forgotten episode, proven only centuries later, while the other changed the world, paving the way for an era of colonialism, migration, and global transformation. Therefore, when we discuss the discovery of America, it's essential to remember that Vikings were the first Europeans to step onto its soil. But it was Columbus who made this discovery a turning point in world history. We've talked about Columbus's voyages and how his discoveries altered the world, revealing a new light to humanity. Now let's shift to the Old World, to Eastern Europe, where a significant event in the mid-15th century marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. This refers to the fall of Constantinople in 1453. Constantinople was the capital of the Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire. Founded by Emperor Constantine the Great in the 1st century, the city remained the primary Christian center of the East for over 1,000 years. Its walls were deemed impregnable. The massive fortifications of Theodosius, built in the 5th century, withstood numerous sieges. The city itself occupied a strategically vital position, controlling the Bosporus, which linked the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. Whoever controlled Constantinople controlled trade routes and the riches of the East. However, by the mid-15th century, Byzantium had become merely a shadow of its former power. Only the capital and small territories around it remained from the once great empire. Everything else was already under the control of the Ottoman Empire. The young Sultan Mehmed II, called the Conqueror, decided to finish what had begun and capture Constantinople, ultimately destroying Byzantium. In the spring of 1453, a vast Ottoman army, numbering between 80 and 100,000 men, began the siege of the city. They had new means of warfare, including giant cannons specifically cast for this campaign. The most famous of them, the so-called Basilica, was a massive bombarding cannon capable of firing stone balls weighing up to 500 kilograms. Behind the walls of Constantinople were no more than 10,000 defenders, half of whom were mercenaries and allies from Genoa and Venice. Emperor Constantine XI, Palaiologos, understood that hope was almost gone, but he chose to fight to the end. The siege lasted nearly 2 months. The Turks bombarded the walls day and night, conducted sorties, and stormed the city. But the Byzantines held firm. Famine plagued the city. People prayed in churches, pleading for a miracle. On the night of May 29, 1453, the final assault began. The Sultan's army attacked the walls from all sides. Several times the Byzantines managed to repel the attackers, but in one area the defense collapsed. The Turks broke into the city. Soon the Sultan's forces moved toward the center. According to legend, Emperor Constantine Palaiologos removed his royal garments and entered the battle as an ordinary soldier. He fell in combat, and his body was never found. The city was captured. Ottoman forces stormed into Hagia Sophia, the main cathedral of Christian Eastern, and before the eyes of the citizens, this majestic temple was transformed into a mosque. The Ottoman Empire established its power at the intersection of continents, while Byzantium vanished forever from the map of the world. The significance of this loss is impossible to overstate. For Europe, the fall of Constantinople was a severe blow, as the Christian world lost its oldest capital. Trade routes to the eastern Mediterranean came under Turkish control, forcing Europeans to seek new routes to India and China. They first circumnavigated Africa, then began searching for pathways across the Atlantic. Thus, the fall of Constantinople became one of the catalysts for the beginning of the era of great geographical discoveries. However, this event had another consequence. Many Byzantine scholars and thinkers seeking refuge from Ottoman oppression, they moved to Italy. They brought ancient Greek manuscripts, philosophical works, and knowledge that had been forgotten in Europe. This sparked a powerful momentum for the Renaissance, as Europe rediscovered ancient culture and began developing new science and art. Thus, the fall of Constantinople didn't just mean the loss of a city. It marked the end of the medieval era and the beginning of a new age. From that moment, the Ottoman Empire emerged as a great power, shaping the destinies of both the East and Europe, while the West entered a period of discovery and transformation. We've witnessed how individual events changed the fates of entire nations, but history isn't solely made up of wars and downfalls. It's also shaped by people whose decisions and actions leave marks for centuries. Now, let's turn our attention to such figures, starting with Alexander the Great, the young king who transformed the world map. Alexander, known as Alexander the Great, had a brilliant yet short life, lasting only 32 years. In that time, he changed the world's landscape and initiated a new cultural era. He was born in 356 BCE in the city of Pella, the capital of Macedonia. His father was King Philip II, an outstanding commander and reformer who built a powerful military force from a small Macedonian state in the Balkans. Philip founded the famous Macedonian phalanx, a battle formation where warriors wielded long spears, giving them a significant advantage on the battlefield. Alexander's mother, Olympias, came from the royal lineage of Epirus and instilled in her son a sense of special destiny, claiming his ancestors descended from Achilles. As a child, Alexander not only trained for war, but also studied the sciences. His tutor was Aristotle, one of the greatest philosophers of antiquity. Under his guidance, Alexander learned philosophy, medicine, astronomy, and literature. He was particularly fascinated by Homer and always carried the Iliad, considering Achilles his hero. At the age of 20, Alexander ascended to the throne after his father's death. Immediately after, he faced uprisings in Greece, where Thebes and other cities believed the young king wouldn't manage. However, Alexander showed determination. Within days, he crushed the rebellion, destroying Thebes completely, leaving only temples and the homes of poets. This brutal act served as a lesson for all of Greece. The new ruler wouldn't tolerate weakness. Following this, he became the leader of the Corinthian League, an alliance of Greek cities under Macedonian control, founded by his father to wage war against Persia. In 334 BCE, Alexander began his famous campaign with an army of about 40,000 warriors. Among them were the Macedonian phalanx, cavalry, mercenaries from Greece, and allies. The first battle occurred at the Granicus River in Asia Minor. Despite being outnumbered, Alexander won by leading a cavalry charge. He nearly died, but his comrades saved him. 2 years later, In 332 BCE, the Battle of Issus took place, where Alexander's army of about 40 Mondas faced King Darius II's forces, which numbered over 100 in. Alexander emerged victorious again. Darius fled, abandoning his family and treasures. Alexander displayed nobility by not harming Darius's wife and daughters, treating them with respect. The climax of his campaign came at the Battle of Gaugamela in 331 BCE. Darius's army reportedly comprised up to 300,000 men, including war elephants and chariots. Against them, Alexander had about 50,000 warriors, but through clever strategy and personal bravery, he triumphed once more. Darius fled again and was soon killed by his own men. The Persian Empire, which had existed for 2 centuries, collapsed. After that, Alexander entered Babylon, Susa, and Persepolis, the treasury of the Achaemenids. In Persepolis, he ordered the palace to be burned. One version claims it was revenge for the destruction of Athens, while another says it happened accidentally during a feast. In 332 BCE, he continued eastward, conquering Central Asia and reaching Bactria and Sogdiana. Here, he met fierce resistance from local tribes, but he managed to suppress it by founding new cities and leaving garrisons. He married Roxana, the daughter of a local ruler, showing his desire to blend cultures. In 326 BCE, he reached India and crossed the Indus River. The most famous battle at this stage was the Battle of the Hydaspes, where the Indian ruler fielded an army with war elephants, new and terrifying weapons for the Macedonians. Nevertheless, Alexander outmaneuvered the enemy forces and won, showing respect for the foe and allowing him to rule under his authority. However, it was in India that Alexander's army refused to march further. The soldiers were exhausted from prolonged campaigns, and despite the king's pleas, they demanded to return. Alexander had to agree. He led his troops back through the Gedrosian desert, where many perished from thirst and hunger. In 323 BCE, Alexander died in Babylon at just 32 years old. The cause of his death remains a mystery. It might have been fever, poisoning, or complications from injuries. His empire proved too vast to maintain. Soon wars broke out among his generals, the Diadochi, and the state was divided into parts. However, Alexander's legacy was enormous. He founded over 70 cities, the most famous being Alexandria in Egypt. He spread the Greek language and culture from the Mediterranean to India, initiating the Hellenistic era, where Greek traditions mingled with Eastern ones. On this foundation, science, art, and philosophy flourished. The Greek language became international, the medium for the later writings of the Gospels. We must remember Genghis Khan, who belongs to an entirely different era and culture. He is often seen as a destroyer, but also as a creator of a new world system. Born in 1162 on the banks of the Onon River, into the family of a leader of a small Mongolian tribe, he was originally named Temujin. His childhood was full of suffering. At 9, his father Yesugei Batar was killed by Tatars, leaving the family unprotected. Relatives turned away from them, and his mother and children faced dire circumstances. Young Temujin experienced hunger, deprivation, and even captivity, but he managed to escape. These trials hardened his spirit. Seeking to gather loyal allies, Temujin gradually strengthened his influence. In 1187, he achieved victory over the Merkids, and in 1189, he was proclaimed Khan. In 1206, at the Kurultai, a gathering of steppe leaders, he received the title Chinggis Khan, meaning Great Khan. From that moment, the unification of Mongolian tribes began. Chinggis Khan's main strength lay in his ability to create systematic structures. He organized the army on a decimal basis, dividing it into tens, hundreds, thousands, and tumens. Each unit consisted of 10,000 warriors. Every soldier had to own several horses, food and weapons, enabling the army to make rapid marches over great distances. Discipline was strict. Cowardice or disobedience led to death, but bravery and loyalty could elevate simple herders to commanders. Chinggis Khan's forces began their conquests in the east. In 1210, he attacked the Tangut state of Xixia, then turned his forces against the Jin Empire in northern China. The Mongols encountered powerful fortresses and siege technology, but quickly learned to use these methods, recruiting engineers from conquered peoples to build battering rams, towers, and catapults. By 1212, the capitals of Jin, such as Zhongdu and other major cities, fell. Then Chinggis Khan set his sights on the west, prompted by an insult. The Khwarezm Shah, Ala ad-Din Muhammad, ordered the execution of a caravan of Mongolian merchants. In response, in 1217, a campaign against the Khwarezmian state began. The Mongols captured Bukhara, Samarkand, and Urgence. The destruction was horrific. Eyewitness accounts reported tens of thousands of residents killed, cities burned. However, Chinggis Khan secured the Silk Road. Merchants who accepted his authority received protection and could travel freely from China to Central Asia. By 1220, the Mongolian forces reached the Caucasus and the steppes of the Black Sea region. In the Battle of the Kalka River in 1223, Mongolian generals Subedai and Jebe defeated a united army of Russian princes and Polovchans. Although it was a reconnaissance operation, it demonstrated that the Mongolian army could operate over great distances and defeat powerful opponents. Meanwhile, Chinggis Khan continued his campaigns in China, conquering Tangut lands and strengthening his influence over vast territories. In 1227, during yet another campaign against Xixia, he passed away. The cause of his death remains debated. Some sources point to a fall from a horse, while others cite illness. He died at the age of 65. After his death, power passed to his son Ogedei, and under him, the Mongol Empire reached unprecedented sizes. However, the foundations for this were laid by Chinggis Khan himself. He created a code of laws known as Yasa, which regulated the empire's life. These laws covered all aspects, from military discipline to social relations. Protection of trade and merchants held significant importance in the Yasa. Trade caravans were under the Khan's protection, and attacks on them were punishable by death. Thanks to the conquests of Chinggis Khan and his successors, a vast territory emerged, stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the Black Sea, and from the Siberian steppes to the Himalayas, becoming the largest empire in human history. Although its conquests were marked by destruction and the loss of millions of lives, it ushered in a new era known as Pax Mongolica, the Mongolian peace. During the 12th and 13th centuries, the Silk Road became the safest in its history. Merchants from Venice and Genoa could reach China, and Chinese goods like porcelain, silk, and gunpowder flowed into Europe. It was during this time that Marco Polo made his famous journey. Chinggis Khan remains in the memory of peoples as a symbol of destruction, but he also became the architect of a new system of connections. His conquests paved the way for the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies between East and West. He didn't just destroy cities, he established order that allowed vast territories to coexist within a unified space. We've just discussed Chinggis Khan, whose name became a symbol of both destruction and creation, and how he transformed Eurasia into a unified space for trade and exchange. But history doesn't only advance through conquerors and generals. Sometimes humanity changes under the influence of bold and daring ideas that outpace their time. One such person was Nikola Tesla. He was born in 1856 in a small village called Smiljan, which was part of Austria-Hungary at the time and is now in modern Croatia. His father was a Serbian Orthodox priest, and his mother came from a family of inventors, possessing remarkable technical skills despite a lack of formal education. Tesla inherited his love for invention from her. From a young age, he displayed extraordinary abilities. He had a phenomenal memory, could instantly reproduce complex texts, and had the gift of visualizing mechanisms so clearly that he could mentally test them before assembly. He called this ability visualization, allowing him to create devices without blueprints or lengthy trials. After studying in Graz and Prague, Tesla worked as an engineer before moving to Paris, where he began working for a company associated with another famous inventor. In 1884, he emigrated to the United States. There, his main rivalry began, known as the War of Currents. One inventor promoted a direct current system, while Tesla championed alternating current. Ultimately, his concept proved more efficient for transmitting energy over long distances. Today, the entire global energy system operates on this principle. But Tesla didn't limit himself to electricity. He was interested in the boldest ideas of the future, including wireless energy transmission. In his tower in Wardenclyffe, built on Long Island in the early 20th century, he attempted to create a system that would transmit electricity and radio signals through the atmosphere and even the ground. If this project had been completed, the world could have accessed wireless energy over a century ago. Tesla foresaw the emergence of radio communication, television, autonomous vehicles, and even smartphones. In a 1910 interview, he shared his thoughts about the future. At his age, he speculated that in the future, people would carry small devices in their pockets, allowing them to communicate over any distance. For his era, this sounded incredible, but today it's the norm. Nevertheless, many of his ideas remained unrealized. Tesla lived in a world of dreams that outpaced his time. He proposed devices for climate control, deadly weapons capable of stopping entire armies, and energy transmission systems for all humanity. However, he didn't always find understanding from investors. Many viewed him as a dreamer rather than a practical man. The retreat. Napoleon's great army dwindled as they faced harsh winter conditions and starvation. Many soldiers perished during the retreat, suffering from cold and hunger. By the time they reached the borders of Russia, only a fraction of the original force remained. The disastrous campaign marked a turning point for Napoleon. He returned to France, but his image had changed forever. The once mighty emperor faced growing opposition at home. His military failures eroded public support. In 1814, coalition forces invaded France. Facing defeat, Napoleon abdicated and was exiled to Elba. However, he escaped and returned to power for a brief period known as the 100 Days. This ended with the Battle of Waterloo in 1815. Defeated again, he was sent to St. Helena, where he lived out his days in isolation. Napoleon's legacy remains complex. He spread revolutionary ideas across Europe, but his wars caused immense suffering. The balance of power shifted after his fall. The Congress of Vienna redrew the map of Europe, establishing a new order. Monarchies were restored, but the seeds of change had been planted. Nationalism and liberalism began to rise in the wake of his rule. As Europe transitioned into the modern era, the impact of these ideas became undeniable. Napoleon shaped not only the fate of nations, but also the course of history. His ambition and vision left a lasting mark on the continent, influencing future generations. A heavy retreat, freezing temperatures, partisans, and attacks from the Russian army decimated the remnants of his forces. Out of 600,000 soldiers, fewer than 100,000 returned home. This defeat became one of the greatest disasters of his career, inspiring France's enemies. In 1813, the Sixth Anti-French Coalition formed, including Russia, Prussia, Austria, Sweden, and Great Britain. In October of that year, the Battle of Leipzig took place, known as the Battle of Nations, where about 500,000 soldiers clashed. Over 300,000 Allied troops faced Napoleon's army of around 200,000. After several days of fighting, the French army suffered defeat and was forced to retreat. In the spring of 1814, the Allied forces entered Paris. Napoleon abdicated and was exiled to the island of Elba, off the Italian coast. It seemed his career was over, but after a year, he returned. In March 1815, Napoleon landed in southern France and reached Paris without any clashes. People began to follow him again, marking the start of the period known as the 100 Days. The climax of this period was the Battle of Waterloo on June 21, 1815. In this battle, Napoleon's army, numbering around 120,000, faced the troops of the Duke of Wellington and Prussian Marshal Gebhard Leberecht von Blücher. At the beginning of the battle, the French succeeded, but by evening, Prussian forces arrived and changed the battle's course. Napoleon faced final defeat and soon surrendered. This time, he was exiled to the island of St. Helena in the Atlantic Ocean, where he died in 1821. The consequences of his defeat were enormous. At the Congress of Vienna, held from 1814 to 1815, diplomats from major European powers redrew the continent's map. France lost all its conquests and returned to its borders of 1792. Prussia gained the Rhineland and part of Poland. Austria strengthened its position in northern Italy and Hungary, while Russia annexed much of Poland and Finland. The Congress aimed to restore the balance of power so that no state could dominate Europe again. As a result, the Holy Alliance formed, comprising Russia, Austria, and Prussia. This system of international agreements and alliances became known as the Vienna System, which ensured relative peace in Europe for almost 40 years, until the revolutions of 1848. We just discussed Napoleon's defeat, which altered Europe's map, illustrating how military mistakes can impact entire nations. However, history can change for other reasons too. Sometimes serendipitous discoveries play a crucial role, and the example of penicillin vividly demonstrates how chance can change the world. Alexander Fleming, a Scottish bacteriologist, was born in 1881 to a farming family. His path to science wasn't clear-cut. He started as a clerk, then served in the army before entering medical school. During World War I, he worked as a doctor in field hospitals and witnessed thousands of soldiers dying not from wounds, but from infections. This shock prompted him to delve into studying bacteria and seek ways to combat them. In 1928, Fleming worked at St. Mary's Hospital in London. His lab looked messy. Tables were cluttered with petri dishes, flasks, and test tubes, but this became the starting point of his discovery. Upon returning from vacation, he noticed mold in a dish where staphylococci were cultivated, and around it, the bacteria had vanished, leaving a clear space. Instead of discarding the dish, he began to study it. Ultimately, he found that the mold belonged to the Penicillium genus and released a substance that killed many bacteria, which he named penicillin. In 1929, he published his findings, suggesting the potential use of the new agent in fighting infections. However, his discovery didn't garner much attention at the time. Chemists struggled to isolate penicillin in a stable form, and doctors deemed it impractical. For many years, this substance remained in the shadows, but in the late 1930s, research resumed at Oxford University. A team led by Howard Florey and Ernst Chain managed to purify penicillin and demonstrated its effectiveness in animals and humans. In 1941, it was first used to treat a human, a police officer named Albert Alexander, who had a blood infection. The treatment showed impressive results. Symptoms began to fade, but the drug supply was insufficient for a full recovery, and the patient sadly died. Nevertheless, it proved that the antibiotic worked. In 1942, amid World War II, mass production of penicillin began, with American pharmaceutical companies actively developing technologies for its large-scale release. By 1944, penicillin was dubbed the wonder drug, saving thousands of soldiers' lives on the front lines. It was used to combat gangrene, sepsis, pneumonia, and other infections that had once been deadly. After the war, production expanded, and penicillin became available to civilians, revolutionizing medicine. Before its introduction, infection mortality was staggering. Even a simple scratch could lead to death, and surgeries often ended in blood infections. However, the advent of antibiotics changed the situation. In 1945, the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded to Fleming, Florey, and Chain, recognizing their remarkable contributions. Fleming warned in his speech, "The time will come when bacteria learn to resist penicillin if used indiscriminately." These words proved prophetic, as humanity now faces the challenge of antibiotic resistance. The story of penicillin isn't just a coincidence. Mold could have grown on any scientist's work, but only Fleming noticed what others would have considered an experimental failure, documented it, and drew conclusions. Without his careful observation, humanity might have remained without antibiotics for much longer. Now, we turn to the mysteries of history, and perhaps the most significant of these is the fate of the Library of Alexandria. This magnificent center of knowledge was founded in the 2nd century BCE during the reign of the Ptolemaic dynasty, descendants of Alexander the Great. According to legend, Ptolemy II Philadelphus initiated the library's creation, aiming to make Alexandria not only Egypt's trading and political capital, but also the intellectual center of the entire ancient world. The library was located in an area known as Brucheion, near the palace complex of Isis. The scientific institute of that time, where scholars worked, was a place where works across various fields were produced. Knowledge such as medicine, astronomy, mathematics, geography, and history. In Alexandria, there was a goal to collect all existing human knowledge, for which a special law was enacted. Every ship arriving at the port of Alexandria had to deliver all books and scrolls. Scribes copied them, while the originals remained in the library, fostering a vast collection. Ancient authors cite various figures, but we're talking about hundreds of thousands of scrolls. Strabo mentioned 400, while other sources talk about 500,000 or even 700,000. In comparison, medieval European libraries sometimes held no more than 100 manuscripts, while this library contained thousands more. It was the greatest collection of ancient knowledge. The holdings included texts by Egyptian priests, observations by Babylonian astronomers, philosophical treatises by Indian thinkers, and works by Greek doctors and mathematicians. Among them might have been early versions of Homer's works, writings by Hippocrates, and texts we only know from references, like Berossus's History of the World, or complete versions of Euclid's and Archimedes' works. However, the library's fate was tragic. By the 1st century BCE, it likely suffered significant losses. In 48 BCE, Julius Caesar arrived in Alexandria, caught in a blockade during the Egyptian War. To disrupt the enemy fleet, Caesar ordered the ships in the harbor to be set ablaze, and the fire spread to warehouses, and according to some authors, to the library. The exact number of destroyed scrolls remains unknown, but many believe that was when the library lost a significant portion of its holdings. There were other blows as well. In the 2nd century CE, Emperor Aurelius waged war against Queen Zenobia of Palmyra, and it's possible that part of the buildings containing manuscripts burned then. Later, at the end of the 1st century, Emperor Theodosius I ordered the destruction of pagan temples, including the famous Serapeum in Alexandria, which housed part of the library known as the Daughter Library. This loss dealt another blow to ancient heritage. There's also a theory about a final blow in the 6th century when the Arab commander Amr ibn al-As conquered Egypt. Late sources claim that the caliph ordered the remaining books to be burned, but modern historians doubt this. By that time, there likely wasn't much left of the great collection. We'll never know what exactly was lost in the flames. Perhaps among the lost texts were discoveries that could have accelerated scientific progress by centuries, or medical knowledge that could have saved millions of lives, or geographic works that revealed a new world to Europeans long before Columbus. The Library of Alexandria became a symbol of the fragility of human memory. A few fires and wars, and the greatest collection of knowledge vanished. Instead of thousands of scrolls, only mentions and mysteries remained. This loss reminds us that history is not just what was preserved, but also what we lost. Perhaps the Library of Alexandria held answers to many questions that remain unanswered today. The Rosetta Stone became an unexpected find that allowed for the recovery of lost knowledge. Its story began in 1799 during Napoleon's Egyptian campaign. The French army occupied Egypt, and soldiers were accompanied by scholars of various specialties. In July of that year, in the small town of Rosetta, modern Rashid, French sappers were dismantling an old Arab fortress. One officer noticed a black basalt slab with 3 texts. This discovery changed science. The inscription on the stone was a decree honoring King Ptolemy I, issued in 196 BCE by the priests of Memphis. The text was engraved in 3 languages: hieroglyphs at the top, Demotic in the middle, and ancient Greek at the bottom. This became the key to deciphering it. Scholars understood the Greek text, allowing them to compare it with the others. After Napoleon's defeat in Egypt in 1801, the stone ended up with the British under the terms of capitulation. It was sent to London, and by 1802 it was on display at the British Museum, where it remains to this day. French scholars made copies and impressions, and from that moment, an international race to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphs began. The first steps were taken by English scholar Thomas Young, who noticed the cartouches, oval frames that presumably contained the names of pharaohs. By comparing the cartouches with the Greek text, he correctly read the name Ptolemy and concluded that some hieroglyphs represented sounds and not just concepts. This was a discovery, but Young didn't complete the work. The decisive contribution came from French scholar Jean-François Champollion. He had been interested in languages since youth and knew Coptic, the last living descendant of the ancient Egyptian language. In 1822, he made a breakthrough by comparing the cartouches with the names Ptolemy and Cleopatra, determining the meaning of a number of hieroglyphs. He realized that Egyptian writing combined 3 levels: phonetic signs representing sounds, diagrams representing objects, and determinatives, symbols clarifying meanings. In September 1822, Champollion presented a report in Paris, where he first proved that Egyptian hieroglyphs could be read. His discovery became a sensation and initiated the recovery of knowledge about ancient Egypt. The significance of the Rosetta Stone cannot be overstated. Before its discovery, Egyptian civilization remained mute. Temples in Luxor, the pyramids in Giza, papyri, all were covered in writings that no one could read. Ancient authors like Herodotus or Plutarch provided only fragmented information. But after Champollion's discovery, the world gained the ability to hear the voice of the Egyptians themselves. This made it possible to study Egyptian religious texts, the Book of the Dead, administrative documents, and economic records. We learned how the pharaoh's economy functioned, what taxes were collected, and what laws were in place. Scholars held the actual words of people who lived thousands of years ago. The stone measures about 112 by 75 centimeters and is about 30 centimeters thick. It's not fully intact. The upper part with the hieroglyphs is damaged, but the lower lines in Greek and Demotic provided enough information for comparisons. The Rosetta Stone became a symbol of archaeology, showing that even one artifact can unlock an entire civilization. If the Library of Alexandria reminds us of what was lost, then the Rosetta Stone demonstrates how a chance find can restore the lost knowledge. The Rosetta Stone, a chance discovery that became the key to ancient Egypt, allowed us to hear the voices of people who lived thousands of years ago. However, history has other examples. When an artifact is discovered, it's placed in museums for study, but deciphering the Voynich manuscript has eluded scholars for many years. This mysterious document, known as the Voynich manuscript. The manuscript was created, according to radiocarbon analysis, around the early 10th century, roughly 600 years ago. The paper dates back to a period between 1400 and 1410. The author remains unknown, and the language of the text is still undeciphered. The manuscript is named after Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish antiquarian who acquired it in 2012 in Italy. Since then, the manuscript has been the subject of numerous studies and debates. It is currently held at Yale University Library under catalog number MS408. The manuscript consists of about 240 pages of parchment, some of which are missing. The text is written in a neat, uniform script using an unknown alphabet. It contains over 20 symbols that repeat and form words. Some researchers suggest it's a cipher, while others believe it's an artificial language. The illustrations attract special attention and are divided into several sections. One section is dedicated to plants, yet most do not match any known botanical species. Another section features astronomical and astrological images, circles, stars, and zodiac symbols. There's a so-called biological section showing nude female figures immersed in strange baths and connected by tubes. There's also a pharmaceutical section displaying vessels, flasks, and items resembling pharmacy tools. For many years, researchers tried to decipher this text. Among them were cryptographers from World Wars I and II, including experts from American and British intelligence. But none offered a definitive solution. Various theories emerged. Some thought it was a coded treatise by alchemists. Others believed it was a book on medicine or a pharmacopoeia from an unknown tradition, while others claimed it was an elaborate hoax or even a nonsensical work. Some researchers hypothesized that the text was written in a forgotten natural language, possibly in a shortened stenographic form. Radiocarbon analysis of the parchment conducted in the early 21st century confirmed the document's authenticity and disproved the late forgery theory. Interestingly, statistical analysis of the text showed that the structure of words and repetitions resembles natural languages. This suggests that the manuscript indeed has meaning and isn't just a jumble of random symbols, though what that meaning is remains a mystery. Today, the Voynich manuscript continues to intrigue. For some, it symbolizes lost knowledge and possibly hidden medieval science. For others, it's an unsolved cipher, while for others, it's a brilliant hoax created in the 10th century to astonish contemporaries. In any case, this manuscript remains one of the most mysterious in the world. Unlike the Rosetta Stone, which became the key to an entire civilization, the Voynich manuscript remains a locked enigma, reminding us that history isn't in a hurry to reveal all its secrets. Modern archaeological discoveries show that history isn't a static mosaic, but a living organism that evolves with scientific progress. If the most important discoveries in the 10th century were city finds, and in the 20th century, the deciphering of scripts, the 21st century has turned its focus to genetics and new methods of analyzing ancient artifacts. One of the most impressive achievements has been extracting and studying DNA from the bones and teeth of humans who lived tens of thousands of years ago. The first successful experiments occurred in the late 20th century, but it was in the 21st century that genetics became a primary tool in archaeology. In 2010, an international group of scientists published the complete genome of a Neanderthal, which was a true sensation. It turned out that modern humans living outside Africa carry from 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. This means our ancestors not only displaced Neanderthals, but also interacted with them, leaving a shared legacy. A few years later, in 2012, a small finger phalanx dating back about 40,000 years was found in the Denisova cave. Genetic analysis indicated that this person belonged to a completely different species, previously unknown to science, now called Denisovans. Their genes are found in modern inhabitants of Southeast Asia and Oceania, with some carrying up to 5% of Denisovan genome. This discovery fundamentally changed our understanding of evolution. Instead of a straight line from Homo erectus to Homo sapiens, we now see a complex network where different human species intersected, mixed, and left offspring. But genetics has also unveiled more subtle details. It's now known that some gene variants inherited from Neanderthals affect immunity, making individuals more resistant to certain infections. Others are linked to metabolism or even predisposition to allergies. In the 21st century, DNA research has shown that the past hasn't vanished. It lives within each of us. A new understanding of Neanderthals' role has become especially significant. In the mid-20th century, they were depicted as crude and primitive beings, extinct about 30,000 years ago. But now we know they were people with their own culture. Archaeological finds in caves across Europe and the Middle East confirm they used tools, could start fires, adorned their bodies, made pendants from eagle claws, and even created simple drawings on walls. In the Lapa dos Breus cave in Spain, images dated to 64,000 years ago were found, meaning they were created long before modern humans appeared in these regions. Neanderthals buried their dead, indicating developed concepts of death. Some burial sites contain flowers suggesting ritual practices. All this shatters the stereotype of primitive savages. It's clear they were close to us, not only genetically, but also culturally. Finally, another surprising discovery in recent decades is Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. Excavations began in the 1990s, but it was only in the 21st century that it became clear this wasn't just a settlement, but a majestic ancient temple complex. Its age is estimated at around 12 billion years, meaning it was built in the 10th millennium BCE. This predates the emergence of cities, pottery, and the wheel. Dozens of stone circles with monumental T-shaped columns were found on the hill. These columns depict lions, boars, snakes, birds, and abstract symbols. Some columns reach 6 meters in height and weigh up to 20 tons. Their construction required colossal effort and organization. The main mystery of Göbekli Tepe is the question of why. The people of that time were hunters and gatherers, yet they managed to erect enormous structures with apparent cult significance. This overturned the usual view of past developments in human society. It was previously believed that agriculture and settled life came first, followed by temples and religious centers. However, findings at Göbekli Tepe challenged this perspective. Perhaps it was precisely this. Rituals and religious ceremonies stimulated the unification of people and the shift to settled life. This complex lasted for several millennia before being deliberately buried. The reasons for this action remain a mystery. Perhaps people changed their rituals or moved their worship to another location. For us, Göbekli Tepe symbolizes that human history began much earlier and has far more complex aspects than we usually imagine. 21st century archaeology revealed 3 key discoveries. Genetic research established a link between us and extinct species, confirming that Neanderthals and Denisovans are part of our genetic heritage. New data showed that Neanderthals had culture and weren't primitive beings. Findings at Göbekli Tepe altered our understanding of civilization's origins, placing religious practices at the foundation of societal development. All this prompts us to realize that the past still holds many mysteries, and each new scientific discovery can change our perception of history.